Trump has recently been sued for $5 million. Now, this is an assault case, sexual assault. This dates back 19 years where someone is accusing Trump of assault in a changing room. Now, there's little evidence, if any. The only evidence there is testimony by a few people. And testimony is actually the weakest form of evidence in a court. So what we're seeing now, this is a civil case. So civil case is very different than a criminal case. A civil case is there 51%, at least 51%, whatever the evidence is, the compelling evidence, the persuasion, 51% to determine liability of the person being sued, and then you would grant punitive damages and so forth. Criminal charges, criminal courts, is this something that is beyond a reasonable doubt to prove that this person is potentially innocent? Okay, so to give an example of this, we have O.J. Simpson. Everyone knows who O.J. Simpson is. There was a civil and a criminal case. Now, most people know about the criminal case because that was publicized everywhere on TV at the time. And this was beyond a reasonable doubt. He was innocent. He was exonerated from that incident. Now, civilly, he was sued. He actually lost the civil suit because over 51% of the evidence showed that he was liable for the incident, and thus he had to pay out a settlement to the families. So this is a very different dynamic, civil versus criminal. Now, we also have different courts in the United States, and you're supposed to technically have a jury of your peers. It's supposed to be impartial, non-biased. A lot of these trials, especially from where they're located, they are extremely biased, and so you're getting jurors and a jury. You're getting juries and a judge who are extremely biased, and so of course they're going to go and be against the person who is, someone like Trump. Trump is not welcome in a lot of these places, like New York. Now, I want to bring up the case of other people like Joe Biden, just because the left is bringing up Trump. Okay, fine. And look, this is not to say that Trump was not part of the activity that he's being accused of. The problem is there's not enough circumstantial evidence to prove it, and you need evidence to prove things in a court of law. Now, the likelihood that he was assaulting people is pretty low, given that Trump has, for the vast majority of his life, been wealthy. He's been a playboy somewhat, and he's been around. Now, when you're a person of high status, for example, and he's even said this on a tape, he said it in a crude way, but it's true, right? He was saying it in a consensual way. He just said it in a crude way. So a lot of people don't like how it sounded, and I agree with that. But the point is, if you're in a certain status position, you open up your dating pool. When you open up your dating pool, this is all evolutionary. This is all biological, right? So women go for men. One of the things is high status. You open up your dating pool, which means you're attracting women. Whether these women are the kind of women that you want or not, that's not of a discussion, but you're attracting these women. And these women, this is consensual, they will go up to you, and they will be very crude. They will want to have certain actions with you. And that's what Trump was saying. So because Trump has been in that situation for decades and most of his life, he's always had those options. It's not likely that he would need to force himself upon women when he has an abundance of options. Now, could you still do that because maybe you have a certain kink or fetish for doing that, or you want to impose power, or you have a big ego? Sure. All right. I will grant that. That is a possibility, but it's a low likelihood considering the background that person is from. Now, there are other people in politics. We'll mention Biden because he's the historical rival to Trump. He has been accused of sexual misappropriation, and there's actually evidence for it. Okay, there's someone who's come out who's a previous Senate aide to Joe Biden, Tara Reid, and there's an accusation there with corroborating evidence. But that is thrown under the carpet. The media is silent about it. Joe Biden denies it. So the common pattern we're seeing is that any claims from politicians on the left, all of those claims are thrown under the rug. A substantial amount of claims thrown at people on the right, those are brought into the media because the media is heavily left-wing. Most of our institutions, in fact, financial, cultural, scholastic, the whole media apparatus, they're on the left. So, of course, they're going to side with the party versus the other party, the people on the right. Now, that's not to say that people on the right are saints. They're not. You have a lot of people on the right who are part of the establishment, just like the majority of people on the left. They're all part of the same uniparty, all part of the same establishment. They're just furthering the cause in different ways, and they're trying to portray a certain identity to the people to split the population to go for left or right, when really it's the same for the most part. You do have a few outsiders, a few outcasts who are coming in and they actually care about America, they actually care about the Constitution, but those people are few and far between. That's a minority of people who come into office, and those people generally align themselves with the Republican Party that has historically been the party of American values, American principles, first and foremost. If we look at this situation, this was 19 years ago. And I've already laid out how, sure, there's a potential that this happened, but there's little evidence. And I gave the example of, well, I gave the reasoning, this is a low likelihood potential situation if it happened 19 years ago, due to the character that Trump is in terms of he already has an abundance of options. But this is coming out now, 18 months before the 2024 election, just in time when everyone's about to run their campaigns. It's no secret that Trump has been attacked for the past 6-7 years, and I'm not a Trump fanboy, but I want to hold people who are on the left and to the right accountable. I've held DeSantis accountable. I've held Trump accountable. I've held a lot of people on the left accountable. I've held people who are libertarians accountable. It doesn't matter what party you're on or what your political ideology is. If there is corruption or malfeasance, wrongdoing in any capacity, we need to hold these people accountable. That's what we, the people, are here for. We're here to hold these elected officials and oftentimes unelected officials, if they're part of corporations, institutions, the media. We're here to hold them accountable, because if no one is there to hold them accountable, they're going to keep doing whatever they want to do. They're going to keep getting away with everything that they're doing. That is, they're in certain positions of power. They commit actions. Those actions, 98% of the time, don't help the American people. They're all just serving themselves. They're all cronies who are helping themselves because they all have power, consolidated power, and the rest of the people don't have power unless they concentrate together. And there's almost zero punishment. Like if we go to the 2008 financial crisis, no one was in prison for that. Very few people have been held accountable and held responsible and actually given jail time or a civil fine or something of the sort due to huge collapses in society. And a lot of it is orchestrated. A lot of it was known well in advance. A lot of people saw this in the mortgage-backed security crisis of '08, that there was a coming collapse, and people were these banks were voluntarily giving out loans to people who could not afford the loans. And then when they default, they would go in and buy up these assets for pennies on the dollar. They would do that with other things as well, other types of assets. So when we see that this is happening now, 18 months before an election, this is all part of the political cycle to stir up controversy and to really demonize candidates so that there is a negative association with the general public to certain candidates. And when they have that constant negative, this cycle of negative news about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 candidates, people are a product of what everything around them tells them. So even if something is not true, if you say it enough times and you're loud about it and it strikes an emotional chord with you, because I've said this so many times, but we're all emotional creatures. We make decisions based off emotion. Do we have a prefrontal cortex and a frontal lobe and we can make cognitive decisions? Yes, but most of the time that requires a lot more willpower. It's easier to have a quick, visceral, emotional reaction to a sort of news event or something that may connect with you personally. And so that's what these different institutions do, because they understand human psychology. They can tap into that brain, the human brain, and portray certain ideas and concepts, and then attach that to people, and now you have a negative association. So when you do that for a period of time, whether something is true or not, most of the time it's not true. We've seen that legacy media has said things time and time again that have been debunked, but they never go back and redact their statements, or if they do edit their statements or redact it, it's too late. They've already done the damage. They go out and they put out misleading information, misleading titles, and they're able to cultivate the culture with a certain perspective of how someone is, someone's character, or like we're using Trump in this example. And that doesn't mean he has, like for example, he has bad rhetoric, he has bad mannerisms. I've seen clips, right, many clips, where he's gone in front of other leaders, other world leaders. This is part of a G7 summit or something like that, and he pushes them aside and fixes up his jacket. I'm not a fan of that. Now, I understand why he's doing it. He has an ego. And a lot of his policies did help America. If we saw that 2016 to 2019 period of time, the economy was great. Minorities were making tons of money. They were in the best position they had ever been historically, or one of the best positions they've ever been historically. And all that came crashing down after 2020. So, and it's been going down. We're in a recessionary period even right now, even though the White House doesn't want to announce that we're in a recessionary period. That's a major problem, that the current administration is creating a facade around our entire economy. That's a huge red flag. just to show that there's little transparent. There's not much that this administration cares about other than protecting themselves so that they can profit behind the scenes with arbitrage. But for the vast American public, there's no transparency. They don't want to give us the truth. And they manipulate the BLS, Bureau of Labor and Statistics. They manipulate the CPI by including substitutes instead of historically using, this was the price for beef, this 70% lean beef. In 2019, this was that price. Now 2020, same good. Here's the price now. The change is the rate of inflation. Now they're substituting, so they can say that, inflation is the same, or inflation got lower. They're using different goods and products, different services, to substitute for the original good or service. This comes in a convenient time where the vast majority of people are not into politics, they're not into culture, they're not into the economic and financial news. They're not searching for this on a daily basis. Even when I pursue this information, it takes hours out of my day, okay? It's very time consuming. And it's not like you sit there and you read or listen to this information. You don't just lightly consume it. While you're consuming it, you have to be thinking about these ideas. There are ideas, perspectives, and information that you're attacking, you're taking it in, you're using your critical thinking to analyze it, and then you are coming up with your own ideas and your own perspectives out of that are bred out of that information. So this is a very time-consuming and arduous, energy-intensive process. Most people are not going to go through that. Most people have a job, they have kids, they have extracurriculars that they have to go to, whether it's part of their kids or just their daily lives. Maybe they're trying to date, they're trying to socialize with their friends, form social bonds, which is huge and very important for humans. We're social creatures. They're spending time on leisure, watching Netflix, watching a movie, catching up on a TV show. So people are using their 24 hours to expend on other things around them. And I will only partially fault people, because you do want to enjoy your existence to an extent. But the part where I am charging faultiness or flawed processes is where people are not acknowledging that everything that they have around them, all the opportunity that they have around them, even if you have a minimum wage job, all the way until you have a job where you're making 6 figures a year, that is opportunity. Even your ability to have excess income every single month and have kids, being able to have kids is a luxury now, because it's very expensive to raise kids in this day and age, even if you're in a developed nation. Now, we could say that you could have kids and live in poverty, sure, but that's not an ideal situation, right? We want an optimal situation. But just the fact that you can have kids, you can turn on Netflix, you can pay for services, that's opportunity. All of that opportunity you're taking for granted because you don't even understand how we have gotten to the point in a first world society where you even have this opportunity. This opportunity was bred out of certain ideas, certain principles: limited government, entrepreneurship, capitalism, law and order. Okay, all of this is cultural. Then it becomes political afterwards. But all of this is cultural. You create a cohesive demographic who generally align with those ideals. Then you push that into the nation, and that country embodies that culture, those values, those principles. If we lose that, which we are losing it, because there's so much, even if we're just focusing on the media right now, okay, so there's tons of different institutions, but let's focus on the institution of media. Let's take away the fact that media is moving away from cable. It's going to online platforms, which we are seeing some competition on online platforms, but still, the vast majority of legacy media is just being pedestalized on these online platforms. It's on homepages and all that. So it's being promoted by default by these platforms who have a lot of power. And so even though people are cutting the cords in cable, they're still being put on display right on the front page as a featured news source on all these different platforms, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, all that. So people are just going to see the surface level information. They're going to go to work. They're going to see the TV on the break room. They're going to go to the airport. They're flying to see their family. They're going to see CNN on TV in the corridor of the airport. They're going to be talking to their friends. Their friends see some clip on TikTok or YouTube from CNN, ABC, MSNBC, NBC. They're going to see all that. That's all surface level. These media organizations, or rather their businesses, these media businesses know exactly what they're putting out. Now, the people at the bottom don't know. When you're an anchor, you're given a teleprompter, you're given a script, you're regurgitating information who people have told you to speak about. There are very few anchors who are doing their due diligence and actually picking stories that they want to talk about. And I know for a fact, there's evidence of this, that in most of these media organizations, there are certain topics that you cannot talk about. you won't be an anchor there for long. You'll be fired. They have certain criteria that they want you to follow, certain information that they want you to talk about, whether you agree with it or not. This is a job. You're getting paid X amount per year. This is what we expect of you. Now, the more you go up the hierarchy, the more you go up the ladder, you have more give and take. But oftentimes those people have the same ideology. They're also conforming to the general culture that has been shifting for decades. And so because they all want to stay on air, they all want to make money, and they all have the same ideology of, political ideology, they're all conforming with what most people believe in by default. And so most people are going to grow up very liberal, not liberal in the classic sense, not a classic liberal, but liberal in the sense of there are a lot of socially liberal ideas and a lot of socialist political policies that they're aligning themselves with, because that's what people are taught in schools, that's what people are taught in universities, and that's what the media is telling you. And then when you discuss it with your peers, naturally they're going to have the same type of discussion, right? I don't want to get too much into this, but let me give an example. Most people, even if they're conservative, they might say I'm socially liberal. Okay, for example, they might say I'm pro-choice. Now, they may not know anything else beyond that. They might not be able to get into a discussion. Well, they could get to a discussion, but they may not be informed enough or have done the critical thinking work necessary to come up with a reasonable conclusion of why they think what they think and how it's logically consistent. They will, if you push them hard enough, and if you're intelligent yourself, you've done the due diligence, you have wisdom, you have experience, you will be able to push them to a certain extent where they are logically inconsistent. So when we have outcomes and we create rules and we create laws, there has to be consistency between A, B, C, and D. Once there's an inconsistency, it serves as a paradox. It's hypocritical. And so you can't say, for example, well, there's freedom of speech, but it only applies to people who are elites. If you're not an elite, or if you don't have a net worth that's at $1 million, you don't have freedom of speech. That's hypocritical, because then the First Amendment does not apply to everyone, right? I'm using that as an example. It does apply to everyone, but if the people who are governing us came in and said that, it wouldn't make sense. There's a logical inconsistency. When we find those inconsistencies, that's how we get to the truth. Now, I'm saying all this to say that what I said previously, the average person is not doing all of this necessary work because they don't see it as a forefront in their mind. Again, they're taking all of this for granted, everything around them. Even if you're not living extremely well off, you're living well off more so than 98% of everyone else in the world. Go to any other country. Most other countries, you do not have the same opportunity. There's no ability for you to go up the hierarchy. You can definitely go down, but you cannot go up. In America, you have the ability to go up, at least as of this video. There are powers out there who are trying to suppress that, where they don't want people to move up because now that serves as competition. The people who are at the top right now, they want to stay at the top. They don't want anyone threatening their position in the hierarchy. So when we understand how we have all this opportunity, making money, being able to build relationships, even, I'll give an example from Yeonmi Park, right? Yeonmi Park is a North Korean defector. She came here. I've watched tons of her interviews. She has said that the fact that when she came here, and she went to Columbia University, and even then it was pretty woke, but she was saying just the fact that she could date whoever she wanted to date. It didn't matter the race, didn't matter the hairstyle, it didn't matter what they were wearing. You could do whatever you wanted to in this nation. Obviously, there are problems in the sexual culture right now, but just to use that example, she's 100% right. Just the fact that you can come here and date anyone who you want to date, any race, color, creed, religion, it doesn't matter. You can come from two totally different nations, historically, ancestrally, two totally different religions, and you can come together and you can still have a relationship. And a lot of other countries, you still can't do that to this day. So there's a lot of different facets of opportunities that people don't understand. They don't realize that they have the opportunity. And because of that, they're actually by default entitled, even though they don't feel entitled. They may actually feel like the world is ending and that they're speaking out against these false concepts, and they're praising certain politicians or certain activists like Greta Thunberg or AOC. They don't realize how those people and that ideology is dangerous in terms of you're actually going against what gives you opportunity, and you're believing in something that is not actually part of this reality that we're living in, but you've been led to believe that you're part of that reality. So going into politics, going into culture, going into all the financial issues that this nation and other nations have, it's very complex. It's like even when you see the tip of the iceberg and you actually are doing your due diligence, there's so much of the iceberg that's underneath the water. And you have to break It's not just one glass ceiling you have to break. You have to break multiple glass ceilings. And you don't even know that there's another glass ceiling until you get to the top and you can feel it and touch it and then break it. It's very difficult to get through all these gates. So I say all that to say, to reiterate, most people are clueless. If you're not clueless, or you're just getting into this journey and you want to make the world a better place, and you want to see that there are false accusations that are being thrown around, there's little to no evidence. These courts are not serving justice, whether it's criminal or civil. We're seeing massive amounts of interference, not just from other nations, but within our own nation. There are people who are compromised, but they're in a position of power, and they can interfere in our process of actually being a democratic nation and being able to solve that problem. So we hold on to the ideals, values, and principles that we have here in America, which has made it the most prosperous nation in the world by GDP, by opportunity. And there are a ton of problems. I've said this before. We have the best healthcare system, especially in certain cities in the US, like Houston. It is super expensive. There's no transparency. The insurance is a middleman, and that's a huge problem. But in terms of healthcare, it's still the best by service. That doesn't mean it's going to be cheap. And idealistically, it should be a lot cheaper than what it is. The problem is there's insurance, there's a middleman, there's no transparency. There's a lot of problems with healthcare. It's an oligopoly, and so they can jack up the prices for certain services. That's basically why they do it. But if more people understood all of these convoluted problems, these are all political problems. It's not just people wearing suit and ties. It's interest, motives, incentives. When people understand this and they're able to tackle those problems, specific niches that they actually care about, and they people who are like-minded come together and they tackle different niches. Some people tackle the intelligence agencies, some people tackle big pharma, some people tackle the medical industry, some people tackle the legal industry. You come together, you do that, you form a coalition, we're able to get a lot done. And by the way, that needs to be upheld every single generation, which I don't see happening. Every generation, it's actually getting worse. So that is a solution. The question is, will people actually be part of the solution, or are you going to continue to be part of the problem?